Hey everyone, I'm Melanie from Streamlined Legal, where we help law firms get the most out of their practice management software. Tonight, we're talking about those document templates that you're using for your estate planning. So, we have a lot of clients that we talk to about their estate planning and how they're representing their clients in Clio Manage. And so, a lot of us are putting one of the clients as the client on the matter. And then, of course, because we can only have one client, we'll put the other client as a related contact, maybe. And we'll call them spouse or husband or wife or whatever it is in the relationship. Alternatively, we might be putting the two clients as custom fields and having them as spouse one and spouse two, or husband and wife, or however you're going to indicate that. Those are two of the options and ways that we represent our clients within an estate planning matter. But tonight, what we're talking about specifically is those document templates that we're using to create the wills and the trusts and the other documents. And a lot of times I get the question about, should I be creating a separate matter for each spouse in order to have those documents populate correctly? So for example, if I had a matter for the husband and I ran a template that said, here's the husband's will, I can use that same template then on the wife's matter if I have the wife in a separate matter and I run another template, the same template, using the wife now as the client instead of the husband as the client in the first matter. And so some firms do prefer to do it that way. I prefer actually to keep the husband and wife together in the same matter because I feel like I'm usually going to bill them together. There's a lot of the same information that I'm pulling off of that matter. And so I find that keeping the husband and wife in the same matter can be very helpful. But then you get the question of, well, how do I address that with templates? Because if I have a template for a will that says take the client's name into the will, then obviously that's not going to help me when it comes to the spouse, right? And so there are two ways basically that we can handle this. Number one is we can create two separate templates, right? I can have a template for my client and I can have a template for my related contact who's the spouse. Or I can have a template for client one that's a custom field and a separate template for client two that's a custom field. And so having two separate templates allows me to use the same matter. And really the only difference between the two templates is it pulling the client's name or is it pulling the related party's name? Or is it pulling client one or client two from the custom fields? And so that's the way that I prefer to handle it. Now there is an alternative way. You can, if you code the template appropriately, you can make it conditional and you can say, hey, let's look at this custom field in Clio in the matter that I have the husband and wife on. And if it's checked to say husband, then I'm going to, or client one, then I'm going to have the document pull their information. But if I change the custom field in my matter to say wife or spouse two, then it's going to go ahead and populate the same template with the wife's information. So I can create my template that way to look at a custom field within the matter and then determine whose information it's going to use on that document. Now, that I find much more complex in creating your template, of course. But then number two, now we have to also train someone to change a custom field every time we're preparing documents. And that I feel like is a little trickier. I feel like that's going to be more of a training issue and more of a training challenge to get that done. And so instead, again, I would recommend creating separate templates, one for the client, one for the co-client, or one for client one and one for client two, depending on how we're going to designate them within the matter. Now, of course, the templated document itself, the rest of the document can remain exactly the same. It's just that it's pulling information for one client versus the other. And so again, my recommendation is to have two separate templates. It can be done in one template, but it's going to be much more complex coding. And it's going to require a lot more training on the part of your team to make sure that they're preparing those documents correctly and adjusting that custom field each time they run a document from document automation. So again, because of that, in order to avoid that, I do recommend creating two separate templates. So I hope that's helpful for you as you continue on your templated journey. And of course, if that's more than you want to take on, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you about the options as far as creating document templates go. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. Have a great evening.